coming to you from the DTC. This is OCN Drives with Jeffrey Erbert.
It's sad, but I'd rather sleep in a car bed.
Graham Briggs.
What am I supposed to say? Stop making fun of my nubs?
And now your host, Jeffrey Erbert.
Drives. I'm Jeff Erbert.
I'm Graham Briggs.
And today we have an extra special guest. Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, g'day everybody. I'm Mike. I was born and raised in Australia and now live here in the US. And hey, I'm here to talk about Australian cars.
Yes. On that note, this episode is titled The Sauzzy Aussie. And like Mike said, we're going to take a deep dive into car culture down under. But first, a message from our sponsors. Not only is this podcast brought to you by our community now, it's also sponsored by the annual Family Fest in Denver. It's Denver's largest family festival, taking place at the National Western Complex Saturday, February 22nd at 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Come take selfies with Clifford. There are lots of free kids activities, vendors, prizes, stage presentations, and more. Kids are free, adults are $10. Get tickets for $5 by purchasing online and using promo code OCN half at checkout. Just go to eventbrite.com and search Family Fest to get your tickets today. Act now. The day of the event, tickets go up to $15. So Family Fest is fun for the entire family, kind of like this podcast.
Yes, we're family fun. And just be sure to subscribe to our channel. Ring the bell to get notified of our latest videos. You'll have the option to be notified of occasional videos or all the videos. If you're on your phone, make sure that you go into the settings and switch on notifications.
All right, mate, let's get cracking.
Let's do it. Here we go.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, I should point out that my good friend Jeff here has a VB in front of him. So not talking about cars for a second, the iconic beer from Australia, I'd almost say, is a VB.
Is there two beers? I mean, obviously, we all know that Foster's is not.
Yeah, okay, so
Australian
Foster's
beer.
is not even made in Australia anymore. We got so
Right.
sick of it, we shipped it out. The other big one down there is Carlton Cold.
Right, okay.
But for me at least, growing up as a kid and watching all the adults drink beer, it was always the famous
Watching
brown
the
and
adults drink beer.
yeah, because I didn't drink beer before I was 18, and, all that. But the brown bottle with the green label, that's always been the thing.
I would be willing to bet that there were many of these stubbies consumed in many garages.
Yeah.
In most parts of Australia.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you're working on your car in Australia, you're likely doing it with a VB at your side.
Absolutely.
Delicious. All right, Mike, well, I just want to thank you for coming onto the show and giving us a pretty, an insider's perspective on Australian car culture because, as you mentioned earlier, you're from Australia. Australia, mate. And and how long were you there for?
So I was born and raised there. I was there till I was 19.
Okay.
And then I moved over to the wonderful US of A. Although I did learn that you, speaking of drinking, you go from being legally allowed to drink to not being allowed to drink again when you move at 19. So
Right.
bad decision on my part on that side of things. But no, I wanted to leave and go live in another country for a couple of years was the original plan. Had a bunch of friends that lived in England and places like that and said it was a good experience. So I left when I was 19, came here and then just never left. Wife, kid, the normal story. So
Gotcha, man.
yeah.
Cool. Well, it sounds like you've spent some time being a hooligan and an irresponsible adolescent in
hoon,
Australia.
A hoon, as they say.
Yep, a bit of a hoon. So, if you wouldn't mind, for all of our curious listeners, how do you go about getting a driver's license in Australia? Because I know there are more hoops to jump through than there are here in the States.
Yeah, it's a different process. Here in the States, I drove around the block and the guy was like, "Oh, you're good,"
Yep.
and away I went. But no, in Australia, it's a lot more complicated than that. So you can get your learner's permit when you're 16. Unless you have like some real reason, you live rurally or something like that to get it earlier. And then you've got essentially 2 years to learn. Now, you could get it later than that if you wanted to, but you can start at 16, which obviously 16 in one day, I was off getting my my learner's permit. So then you have plates that you put on your car, and now I know there's going to be some Aussies that'll listen to this and be like, that's not the way it is anymore. It's been 15 years, give me a break. But back when I was learning, you had a learner's permit, and then you had to have L plates on your car to signify that you were a driver that is learning. So it would be a very big yellow square and then a black L. And you'd stick that up on your window, and then it would cause all the other drivers to be very angry with you because they just assume if you've got an L plate on your car, you can't drive. So then you turn 18, you go take your test. Now, here's the thing. We have driving schools in Australia like you guys do. Driving schools here, as far as I understand, teach you how to drive. Would that be correct?
I mean, I believe that is the purpose.
I mean, they don't just teach you how to drive. They teach you, a lot of it is just all the rules and blah, 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 blah.
So the whole point, in my opinion, the whole point of a driving school in Australia, assuming that you know the basics of driving, is how to pass the test. So when I went to driving school, my parents sent me, I've been driving since I was about 9, grew up on a farm.
Right.
We had plenty of cars. The first one was a 71 Datsun. Best car in the world.
Datsun runs great.
Hey, that thing ran on 3 cylinders for years, man. So I could already drive, and I was actually pretty good with my, peripherals and making sure I was safe on the road. But there's no way I would have passed the test if I didn't take this driving course. So they just teach you all the things that they're looking for to make sure that you don't get marked down and not pass the test. So one of the biggest things is mirrors. So if you're not checking your mirrors every 7 seconds or whatever it is, they'll fail you. If you can't parallel park, they'll fail you. If you don't stop at a stop sign and then creep forward to actually see the traffic, you'll fail. And any one of those things, just one nick and that's it. You got to go take your test again in 30 days or something. So super, super, super difficult tests. According to the guy that did my test when I got my license, said that I did very well. But I still got 5 marks for not checking my mirrors. And I thought I checked my mirrors about every 5 seconds. So maybe he just needed to get me for something. I'm not sure. But plenty of mates down in Australia that didn't pass the first time and then ended up going to one of those driving schools to figure out the little tricks of the trade to get you passed. So it's not easy. And then the great thing is, after all of that, once you actually get your license, the first 3 years you're a probationary driver. And so now this is what's changed. I know the colors of the plates have changed now, but back when I was doing it, for the 3 years, you had a red plate with a white P. And it's different by state, actually, I think, as well. So then I had P plates, and that's like cop magnet, right? So if you've got the P plate, plus you've got even just an exhaust on your car, that's it. You're probably getting pulled over, and the cops can pull you over for no reason there. Just do a random breath test or whatever. And then the other thing is you can't have any alcohol in your system, 0.0 for the first 3 years of your license. And then after that, it's 0.05.
Oh, interesting. That sounds very not Australian.
Yeah, right? pretty tight around that.
It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and we have very safe roads for that reason.
Yeah.
But
and that was going to be my next question. Do you think that all of these things result in better drivers? Would you say Australians are generally better drivers than Americans?
Better drivers might be a stretch.
Safer?
Yeah,
perhaps?
I think ultimately you're safer on the roads. Obviously, there's less people in Australia by a lot.
Right.
So it's a bit of an odd comparison to the US. But yeah, ultimately, I think you're a bit safer on the road. You wouldn't dare drink and drive in Australia.
Right.
Especially, Friday, Saturday night. There's not a chance that you would make it anywhere without going through a booze bus. A roadblock, as you call it.
Yes, roadblock.
And then if you try and duck around the booze bus, there'll be a cop sitting in the side street, and he'll pull you over and breathalyze you. So, drunk driving in Australia is a very, it's not unheard of. Obviously people still get DUIs and all that sort of stuff, but it's much more reduced than what goes on here in the US.
Is it more taboo? It's more like a bigger thing, like if you actually do it,
the consequences are much larger. What you guys sort of get the first time you get a DUI here, even if it's you're only a couple of dots over, compared to Australia. I mean, if you're a 0.1 or a 0.01 over, it's the same consequence. Obviously, if you're up at 4.0 or something, well, you're probably dead at that point. But,
you're close to it.
But you know what I mean. Like if it's really bad, then there's additional consequences. But just being 0.01 over, that they will write you a ticket every time and take your license away. So. It's interesting. But like I said, it keeps the road safer, and not for 1 second did I ever think about having a drink and driving, because I just assumed I'd get busted, and then you lost your license for a year by default. So.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, since we were talking license, let's move into like your cars that you had while you were in Australia.
There's a lot of them.
What was like? What are some that you can just rattle off, and then give us like a list of like your top?
Well, obviously the Datsun that runs on 3 cylinders.
71 Datsun. Yeah. My cousin drove that into the dam one day. Ooh. So we went got the tractor and dragged it out and cleaned it all out, and for some reason we could never get the 4th cylinder to fire anymore.
Interesting.
Water or something. Apparently water and engines don't mix, but that was by far the most bulletproof car we had. That thing went in the river a few times, actually. And then when I was learning on an 86 Corolla, and that thing got a sound system in it that was so big that by the time I got to where I was going, the battery was dead.
Perfect.
Excellent.
So that was a fun game, and that same car had sort of similar issues. It was a carby engine. That was where I learned about carbureted engines, and had to do the carby on that thing like 3 times, and then we decided we're just going to chop the exhaust out and let that thing run without an exhaust, and that was a good fun one. But that was the learning car, right? So it didn't go on the main roads all that often. And then my ultimate favorite car that I put a lot of time and effort into was a Commodore. So a Holden Commodore. I had a VS Commodore. And I bought that thing, and within about 2 weeks, the entire block was torn out. Transmission was torn out. Redid the whole exhaust custom. Had a friend of mine that had a mandrel bender in his shop, so he bumped it all up for me. And then we put the supercharged V6 into it, and then switched it out for a manual transmission. Note to self, when you switch out a manual transmission, do that before you do the sound system, because I used the clutch hole for all of my zero gauge wiring for the sound system, and then had to redo all that because you need the clutch hole for a clutch. But yeah, that was that was the car. That was the one that I took to Summer Nats and Easter Nats. I won a couple of statewide sound off competitions with the sound system I had in that one. There was 4 18s in the back of that thing.
Dang.
Commodores have big
loud.
trunks, man.
Yeah.
You can fit a lot in the boot in those things. But that was my ultimate favorite car. And then in the family, we were very much a Holden family. So Dad drove Caprices a lot. So that's like what the Prime Minister rides around in, and really, really souped up nice version of a Commodore. That was where I got the idea about the supercharger. He had one of those that had a supercharger V6.
Nice.
Really nice. And then there was a couple of others. It was like we had a Peugeot at one point. We had, what was that thing? A Toyota Echo. Have you ever seen those things?
Gotta love the Toyota Echo.
So my sister drove that car 250,000 kilometers with just oil changes. So for the fact
Sounds
that
like
I
a Toyota.
hated that stupid car, they're incredibly reliable.
Definitely.
Yeah, and then I was a Holden guy, right? So you don't cross over. Right, if you like Holden, you don't touch Fords. You despise Fords. If you're a Ford guy, you never touch a Holden. So I was always into Holdens. I had an Escort at one point. That was a Ford. Hated that thing. And I don't know. I mean, I'd come across cars and I'd have them for like a month. A mate of mine would be like, I'm trying to get rid of this thing. And I'm like, I got some cash, I'll buy it off you. And then I'd look at it like 3 weeks later and go, why did I buy this thing?
Yeah.
So I mean, you name it, I probably had it in my garage at some point.
Well, in full disclosure, Mike is a car guy through and through. He's not just your typical Aussie in that. I don't think Aussies buy and sell cars as often as you do.
No, probably not. Although I had mates that would buy them and sell them once. Like they you know how people flip houses? They would flip cars.
Flip cars, yeah.
Yeah. So
sometimes literally.
And a lot of Japanese cars, like we have like the original out of Japan Skylines down there and stuff. So there's guys that would get stuck on a particular style of car or model of car, and they'd start overhauling them and flipping them and overhauling and flipping.
Would you say that a lot of it is like a majority of people work on their cars if they have a car in Australia, at least? Like, or even just like, how about this? Like, I bet in the United States you'd probably find, I would say probably 60-70% of the people probably get oil changes instead of doing an oil change themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 15 years, right? So maybe things have changed. But when I was down there, it was at least in my circle, it was very, very uncommon to pay someone to do an oil
do
change.
work.
Flush a
change,
radiator, any of that sort of stuff,
Right.
transmission service. Almost all of that was done by me and my mates. And if you didn't know how to do it, then it was probably in my garage.
Right.
So
Or you'd
it's-
find someone.
or you'd find someone that has a
Yeah.
garage or knows what they're doing. Yeah, it's very, very rare to take a vehicle in for something as simple as maintenance. That being said, things have changed. I own a Volkswagen Golf here now, and every time you change the oil, you've got to buy a new plug.
Yep.
So there's probably a lot of stuff like that just drives people away from doing that nowadays. And maybe it's cheaper to get oil changes at the shop now. But even me myself now, not with the Golf, but every other car that we own, I still do my own oil changes here. And people look at me really strangely when I do it.
Really?
Well, because I'm out in my garage and I'm under the car and at least I live in suburbia, so you get the people that are just like, why aren't you taking it to the shop for that? And I'm like, because it's like a quarter of the price to do it myself. But yeah, I would say in generality, Australians are much more prone to work on their vehicle themselves
Interesting.
before they take it to a shop.
Because I know there's definitely a hot rod culture in Australia. Well, not hot rod per se, but a car modification culture.
Like tuner, mono stuff. Yeah.
Just making things go stupid fast.
Yep.
Which I know you mentioned earlier, your Commodore, you'd done some work to it. And tell me about how law enforcement reacted to that.
Yeah, not great. So pretty much the whole time that I finally had my license to when I moved here, I lived in the same house. And so I would drive about an hour and 15 minutes each way to work. And it got to the point where a week would go by and then I would get pulled over by the same cop every time. I'm assuming it was just his shift lined up with my driving habits or something. I'm not sure. But so I would get pulled over once, twice, sometimes 3 times a month. And the officer knew my name, and he'd walk up and he'd go, "Hey, Michael, mate, what'd you do to the car this week?" And I'd be like, "Nothing, because I haven't even had time to put the stuff back on that you made me take off last week." But yeah, I mean, it's especially when you're on your P plates, you can't have a turbocharged engine.
Really?
I don't think you could even have a V8. That might have changed now. But yeah, you couldn't have. It had to be naturally aspirated. You couldn't have a V8. It was very, very strict. And if you had a manual vehicle but you didn't have a manual license, then you couldn't drive a manual vehicle. I think that's still
really?
the case. Yep. So you when you go to do your license, you do either automatic or manual. And if you didn't do manual,
Wait, you can't do both? You can't be like,
Well,
I can drive both?
Obviously, if I can drive a manual, I can drive it. Well, I'd hope you could drive an auto.
That's my point. Is like, so you're just trying to say like the manual, you needed to take something on a test or something.
You would have to test in a manual vehicle.
Gotcha. Yep.
And I guess that's the other thing. Is the reason you want to go with a driving teaching. Someone that teaches you to drive is you test in their vehicle.
Oh, okay.
So I went with someone that had a manual vehicle, and then I went and did my test in their vehicle with a manual. So that's the other. So they check all of that sort of stuff. So they pull me over, and I'd get what they call a canary. So it's a bright yellow sticker that they stick on your window. I don't understand what they stick it on there with, because it is the most impossible thing to get off your window. You try and tear it off, and there'll be a nice yellow strip there that shows that you try to tear it off. So some magical glue or something that the shops apparently had to get it off. But you would essentially have to take everything off the vehicle that was illegal or that was cited on that canary, and then take it to a roadworthy inspection place. And they would go over the entire vehicle, and if they find anything else that the cop didn't even find, then you have to do that as well. Put it all back to stock, take it down to the roadworthy office, show them that you got the certificate that says you took it all off, get your registration back, and then do it all again when the cops pull me over the next time. So eventually I got to know them pretty well. They'd overlook a few things. I had, obviously, the custom exhaust on that, and I would never pull that off.
Yeah.
I'd do everything else, and then... So, yeah, it was a fun game, convincing them to just let me off versus convincing the guy at the roadworthy place that no, that's supposed to be there, and then get canaries removed and put back on and removed, and it was an interesting couple of years there with the cops in my area.
Definitely. Well, then, since we're still talking about your time when you lived in Australia. Growing up, we all kind of have these cars that we lust after and dream about. What about you when you were a kid? What if you had unlimited dollary dues? What would you have bought?
Unlimited dollar reduce. Well, actually, it's funny. It obviously changes. It changes over the
Australian
years.
for money.
I think once I got to a point where I was actually driving vehicles and sort of understood how to tear them apart and put it back together again, I was really into the sort of the Japanese scene. And actually, the car that I would probably go back to immediately if I went back there and had some cash to do it would be the car that a mate of mine had, and that was an R32 Skyline.
Oh, cool.
So quick story about this one. So he found this R32 Skyline outside this shop that we went to one day to pick up something completely different. And it was just sitting out there, and he was like, mate, what's up with that car out there? And he's like, the kid bought an eBay turbo, put it on there, took it out the first night, and blew the entire engine.
Oh, man.
Idiot. So, so anyway, he was like, what's it sitting there for? He's like, the kid just wants me to see if I could sell it for him. And so, I turned to my mate, and I was like, listen, we can probably buy this thing for dirt cheap, get a crate engine shipped in from Japan, put all this thing back together again, and have you a badass Skyline for well under value, and then just maintain it and whatnot. So funny story, he lives in the US now, so he sold that thing and doubled his money on it when he sold it.
I was just gonna say easily.
So anyway, we did that exact thing. He bought that off that guy for an amazing price. We shipped an engine in, put it in over a weekend in a large amount of EBs, and put it all back together again. And he had himself a twin turbo V6. It was probably one of the most incredible cars I've ever driven. Super awesome power. You've probably picked up on
Take it as a manual, likely.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then I was, I was in really into sound systems and stuff, so we put some pretty decent sound into that thing as well. But we want to
Josh wants to see our
he
faces.
wants to see my face. That's bad.
That's funny, Josh, because you told us we had faces for radio earlier.
Yeah, he told us, Jeff.
The great thing is no one can hear Josh, so we're just having this conversation with ourselves, which is...
It wouldn't be out of the
always very
ordinary for us anyway.
We'll put subtitles in for...
Definitely. So I want to go back to the Skyline for a minute. You did confirm that it is a manual, and I have to ask you, I've been to Australia a handful of times, and it's been a while, but if I remember correctly, the shift pattern is the same, correct? As our right-hand drive manual cars. So first is still all the way over to the left and up.
I think that's right. Man, it's been years. I think that's right. But I know there was some big changes when they brought them over to the US. Obviously, they converted them to the other side of the vehicle.
Yeah.
But I thought they changed some other stuff as well that really upset people, and that's why the Australian ones were so sought after, because they're the correct side drive. They had all of the Japanese parts in them. I thought there was something, and this is, I'll have to look this up later. There was something about bringing them into the US where the US was like, no, you've got to change this and this and this and this.
Oh.
It's something also, I think, with the front and the rear bumpers, which is typically what happens with cars that they're trying to bring into the United States, is they have to have certain, like, between that and the chassis and that and the engine, it's like a big thing for US, and a lot of cars during the 80s and 90s did not... A lot of the Japanese cars did not fit that spec.
Is that crash test rating stuff? I'm assuming?
Yeah, it's crash test rating stuff. So, like, it's certain things, like Ferraris were really big for this, like especially sports cars, because they only had so much room between that and the engine, and they had to add these, beefier, bumpers on them to give a little bit more room and a little bit better crash rating. So that's... Now you can just bring in cars, at least they have to be like 25 years or older to be on the classic car, and if they meet that standard, then you can bring them in no matter what. They don't have to meet any standards or any of that because it's a classic car.
I think there's actually 3 exceptions. One is the classic vehicle exception that you mentioned. The other is an ultra small manufacturer.
That's true, yep.
Or something. I'm not familiar with that one. And then also kit cars.
True,
I think
right.
you can
You're right.
get away with it
Yep.
somehow too. All right, so we do think the shift pattern is still the same. I think the clutch and the gas are still in the same orientation. It's just you're on the wrong side of the car.
Well,
actually, we're technically on the right side.
Actually, you're technically on.
It's the wrong side.
Technically, yes, he is on the right side.
Right.
It is the
right
incorrect.
As in correct or right is in position.
my thing is manual. Like I don't know if I could ever drive a manual with a left hand. It would just feel so.
I said the same
unnatural for me.
thing. But when you go to the arcade in Australia,
Yeah.
the Daytona racing game,
Oh, yeah.
the shifter's on the American side. See, and I used to always complain
Hell
about
yeah,
that,
brother.
but then I realized that it was just preparing me for moving to the US.
Yeah, exactly.
That I would be comfortable with shifting on that side.
It was all part of our plan.
It's a lot easier than you think. Like you said, the shift pattern up to the left none of that changes. It's literally just the hand that you're doing it with, and then obviously the side of the vehicle that you're sitting on. So it's a lot easier to adjust. The hardest thing to adjust for me was making turns. So you'd be driving down the road and no problem at all. I'd be on the right hand side of the road or the left hand side of the road, depending on which country I'm in. But the moment I come up to an intersection, all logic would go out of my head, and I would just naturally turn onto the wrong side of the road and then go, "Oh crap! I'm about to run into oncoming traffic." And then that was mostly sleep and stuff. So when I first moved here, I was doing a lot of DJ gigs and traveling a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd find driving home at 4:00 in the morning, you just naturally. Good thing there's no cars on the road.
Right.
But you'd sort of naturally turn back onto the side of the road, and then you'd go, "Oh, wait, I'm in the wrong country." But yeah, shifting and moving side of the vehicles was a couple of days of getting a comfort level. But just remembering which side of the road to drive on when you come into an intersection, that was a couple of months before I got into that one. So
Josh is asking.
Opposite, right? So what Josh is asking is that the unwritten traffic rules the same, and it's the opposite in Australia. So the fast lane, if you will, would be the right hand lane, and then the slow lane would be the left hand lane because you exit the opposite side of the road. So that's different. Almost everything else is the same. We have almost all the same. So I didn't know what the heck a four-way stop was before I moved here, and then we got up to it, and I was like, so how does this work? And they're like, well, whoever gets here first goes first. And I was like, okay, but why don't you just put a roundabout in? And someone said to me, oh, well, Coloradans at least don't know how to use roundabouts. And I learned that over the years. There was a hospital I used to visit to see a friend a lot, and there was a big boy roundabout there, and it was a 2-lane roundabout, and people could just not figure it out. And I used to go through 4 and 5 lane roundabouts in Australia. So it was interesting to me that you guys had 4-way stops and we used roundabouts, and if you brought Australian up to a 4-way stop, they wouldn't have a clue what to do. And same thing, we bring apparently a Coloradan or American up to a roundabout and they don't know what to do. So
Or worse, a Melbourne hook turn.
Oh yeah. So I was born in Melbourne. So that's on the southeast coast in Victoria. And in the city they have things called hook turns, and I'm not even going to try and explain it without being able to draw a picture. But essentially, you turn right from the left-hand side of the road. Is how I'll explain it. So go ahead and Google that one later and look up a hook
I'm sure
turn.
there's a good video of somebody doing it.
There's got to be great videos. If people do it right, it is actually a very, very good way of easing traffic at intersections downtown. But it's horrible when people don't know what they're doing.
In Michigan, we call them Michigan lefts because you don't turn a lot of country roads or Michigan highways don't have a left-hand turn. So because they want to get traffic going, so you have to go. You can't turn on a left. You have to go up. You have to turn around, make a U-turn to get onto the other side to then make a right. So you actually make a right to make a left in Michigan.
But you have to do a U-turn to get to it?
Yeah, so say you're going this way and this is the road that you want to get to. This is great for our audio listeners. Go watch our YouTube, all right? But you're going this way. It's a two-lane, so you have to go up. You have to turn onto this lane to then come back towards it and then take a right.
And then take your right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't see how that...
It's even interesting here in the United States.
I don't see how that makes things more efficient, though.
Let's just say this. We all know that roundabouts are the most efficient way to actually have an intersection. They're actually the quickest and are the safest. The problem is that you have to have people that know what to do on them. So, although I've been seeing more and more roundabouts being put in at new communities and new places.
Yeah, there's 3 up by Golden.
Yeah,
They're fun to kind of
Stapleton has a bunch of them too. So, but
I guess we'll learn over time.
We as Americans will learn over time.
Right.
All right. So, Mike, you told us a little bit about when you came to the States, getting used to driving on the correct side of the road. And I say correct because the majority of countries drive on our side. Not to mention...
Is that correct?
I don't know
if
that's
is.
Correct.
I would be willing to bet that the majority of countries in the world drive on the right side of the road, left side of the car.
I'm gonna have to go look that up now.
'Cause
I
if you
thought it
think
was the
about
other.
it-
I thought it was the other way around.
No, because we have pretty much all of North America is like us. South
then-
America is pretty much a free for all. No, just kidding. And then most of Europe, except for Great Britain. So we're talking Germany, Italy, France.
You're right.
so.
Most countries do choose right-hand driving.
Yes.
Right hand of the road, left hand of the car.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, I stand
Anyway,
corrected.
so I say-
continue on.
lots of corrections. But you talked a little bit about getting used to driving in our way on our side of the roads and stuff. I want to ask you, what was the first car that you purchased when you moved to the States?
A 2001 Ford Probe. Actually, no, 1998 Ford Probe. Excuse me.
Spoken like a true Holden guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I came over and I didn't want to throw a ton of money down on a car, especially you
That
come
makes
into a new
sense.
country, you come into a whole choice of new cars, right? So I said to myself, I don't want to come in and just pick a car and put some money into it and buy it and whatever. So I went down to the lot and I moved here with my parents, right? So they were buying vehicles as well, and I think Dad got a Jetta or something, and Mom got an Escape or something like that. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna buy something cash and drive around in that for a while. So for $2,000, I got myself a '98 Ford Probe V6 in a very lightweight car. I'm actually very, very happy with that car. The engine seized on me one day, and that was the end of it. But yeah, that was my daily driver
What great
for
relationships do.
Yes.
yeah. Well, and I mean, Ford Probes, they were pretty well known for problems. But yeah, that was
Starting with the name.
yeah.
But I could see why you were attracted to the car.
I was like a V6 in this tiny little thing. Yeah, I'll give that a go. So no, it was a good car. I think I got it with about 100,000 on the clock when I got it, and it was my daily driver for 2 years.
So for Australian culture, is it more like what would be like a typical vehicle? Like here in America, we have you have your your like not hot rods, but like you have Ford and Chevy, but you would have like a mid-sized car that has a V6 in it. That's a typical car here. And now I would say we're typically we're in the years of the small SUV.
Yeah, with like
ute.
a little turbo on a 4-cylinder.
Yeah, and that's where we're at. So what would be like typical in Australia?
it's pretty similar down there. So for the longest time, it was the common family car was either a Holden Commodore or a Ford Falcon. So sort of similar size to a Ford Taurus back in the days for you guys. Generally, they'd come with a V6. They'd have a V8 option, and that was the go for years. And then the same sort of thing happened in Australia that happened here, except more Euro trash, as I'd say.
Yes.
So, I mean, Ford stopped manufacturing in Australia in 2016, I think it was.
Yep.
Holden was right behind them in
Yep.
2017. They're obviously still brands down there, but everything is imported now, and it's all sort of gone to that same thing. So it's a smaller vehicle, or even if it's a large vehicle, it's usually a 4-cylinder with a turbo, or V6 is the biggest option that you can do. And getting into a V8, you're sort of moving more into the luxury / sports category now. And now it's a mixture of everything. It's everything from Hyundai, as we'd say, or Hyundai, however you guys say it, Nissan or Nissan,
Nissan.
Peugeots. There's a ton of Peugeots down there.
Yep.
And then whatever Holden and Ford are bringing in as their rebrands now from Europe and
Australia
and
has a
Great
couple of cars that I am jealous that they have that the United States does not get. Some of them are the
Utes for one.
Well, what's that?
Utes for one.
Oh yeah, well Utes big time. I mean, obviously that's a huge thing. I didn't know if Holden still was making. What's that one that car? Oh, that truck one that I showed you. What's that one called? With the flat back. It basically looks like an El Camino, just nicer.
What is
I
it?
don't know.
I don't know what
It's-
it's
it's like
I mean, was it a Commodore Ute?
It's a V8. It had a V8 on it.
It could be a Commodore Ute.
It
Yeah,
might
but
be.
was
It
it,
might
but it was
be.
flat on the back?
Yeah, like it was just like it had a truck.
Oh, it looked like a pickup truck.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the Ute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be like the SSU.
But do they still? But does Holden? So Holden just brings them in because I
So-
don't know where else they sell them. Yes,
That one?
Yes, that one.
So from
Yeah,
what,
that's
from
a Commodore Ute.
yeah. So that's Commodore Ute. The simple answer is I don't know. I think Holden is. I thought Ford stopped making them.
Yeah.
Because Ford had the XRs, I think they were,
Yeah.
which is basically the equivalent to the Commodore Ute. But
Right.
I'm not sure. I know that they're still popular down
Yeah.
there. So if you've got one that's one of the older years that was
Right.
made in Australia, they're actually holding their value really well. But I'm not sure if they're making them anymore.
Holden their
Holding
value.
the value.
Holden's value. Yeah.
Ford now is selling the Ranger Raptor, which is a mid-sized truck that is got a V6 in it.
Yeah,
that's the
I
same.
know. They
But
get
they're
the
gonna-
V8. How do you
they're
guys
gonna
get
throw-
the V8?
They're going to throw a V8 in it.
How do you get the V8?
Yeah, you guys get a V8 Ranger Raptor, and I thought this was the land
Oh,
of the
did they
free.
release it as a V8 down there?
Yeah, they're going to.
Oh, I'm
Yep.
Yeah.
jealous.
So you're moving back?
Maybe.
Me too.
Well, I mean,
put me in your suitcase.
to answer your question, Graham, you guys got a couple of Australian cars, right? So you had the Pontiac GTO. I think
Yep.
that was 04 to 06, maybe.
Yeah, that was a Holden base.
Holden
That was the Monaro,
Monaro.
but they changed out the engine to the LS2, right?
Yep.
Out of the Corvette.
Yeah.
So my dad had one of those here for about a year. Awesome car. It was nice to see an Australian body
Right.
rolling around the streets here. Obviously, they converted it to
That's how
the
I
other
feel
side of
about
the vehicle
branding,
and
yeah,
left
yeah,
hand, you
yeah.
know. But you had that, and then I think the Pontiac G8.
Correct.
G8, yep.
Yeah, was essentially the rebranded Commodore,
Mm-hmm.
and then Pontiac just decided to stop making cars altogether. So that sort of ended that.
There
trip.
was a little thing called 2008, 2009 that happened. Fun
That is
for,
true.
Fun for
Yeah,
GM,
fun for
fun for
everybody.
GM and all of their subsidiaries.
Fun for everyone.
And then what else was there? There was so Isuzu brought over.
Oh, that's right. I
They brought over the rodeo or the
Yeah.
rodeo, as the Australians would call it.
The
That was the rodeo.
rodeo.
The Rodeo was a fantastic looking car.
I get it makes sense. Hey, you want to go for a rodeo drive? Sounds
ridiculous.
sexier.
Oh God. Yes, Jeff, it does. You are.
I'm willing to
correct.
pay double for a rodeo drive. When I am just a
rodeo drive?
rodeo.
Hey, there's some people that really like Brokeback Mountain.
There's some, oh my, Graham.
Is
Right.
Graham fired again?
Yeah, again.
Yeah,
He's turning down my mic at the moment.
he is. It's for
What
the
else?
better.
What else do you have?
All right, so to sort of follow on from what we've been talking about with the Australian, motorheads down there, if
Yeah.
you will. So we've all got to have a place to meet,
Right?
and cause trouble as usual. So they had what they used to call the Easter Nats, and they also had the Summer Nats, and that's still going. But the Easter Nats were in Melbourne, where I came from. So basically, they're amateur races and amateur events that you can enroll your own vehicle in. Obviously, you have a lot of professional vehicle shop and stuff like that for shows as well. But it was all very driven around the amateur builder. So they would have burnout competitions. They'd have races. They do car cruises at night, so everybody get in their cars and drive around the city and
Yep,
stuff like that. And so they had Easter Nats in Australia while I was there, and then apparently I think it was 2008 or 2009, it got so out of control that between the council or the city, the police, and the people in the neighborhoods, they got it shut down. That then turned into a riot.
Fantastic.
And so, basically everybody that used to go to Eastern Nats decided to riot in the city and break a bunch of things and act like hooligans as they are. But they still have Summer Nats. So the other one we used to go to was we would drive up to Canberra every year.
Okay.
And we would go to Summer Nats, and if we had a vehicle that you didn't really want to drive there, we'd tow it. And that's a whole other story about Australians towing stupid things with little cars. I
love it.
I'll show you some photos of that one.
Classics.
But yeah, we would tow the vehicles up there, or we'd drive the vehicles up there. And we'd go to these competitions, and there were 3-4 day, long weekend competitions, usually right at the beginning of the year. So, January 2nd through January 4th or 5th or something like that. And then... Oh, and congratulations to Mike. Mm-hmm. Apparently,
Oh,
he's
nice.
leaving to go to the hospital to see his
Mike
kid.
from Parental Composure
Yep.
is on his way to the hospital to welcome another life into this world.
It's funny how he runs a podcast called Parental Composure, and now he's off to have another.
Well, let's hope he's composed.
I was gonna say, and he looked fairly composed.
He
as
did
was
this
walking
morning.
out.
Yeah.
This morning he was pretty
Yeah.
He's pretty
pretty chill
calm and
about
cool.
it.
but congratulations to him. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah. So if you want to hear all about the trials and tribulations of newborn and looking over newborn, go check out their podcast.
Get a
Parental
feeling that's coming up on the
also on ourcommunitynow.com. Anyway, sorry, Mike didn't.
No,
mean
you're
to-
good. You're good. That was
Actually,
just-
Josh cut us off.
Yeah, it was a good
What
interruption.
kind of producer are you, Josh? Cutting us off.
Yeah, no, I'll give it to you this time. It was a good interruption. The rest of them, though,
The rest, yeah.
The rest of them
Let's
are
just
probably-
cut the cord on his mic.
it sounds like a
Next
great
time.
idea.
He's got us all shut off.
Yeah. So
anyway, back to the-
so summer nats. So my favorite was always the burnout competitions, and the whole goal of that is to create as much smoke as possible and destroy your tires and the rest of your vehicle as quickly as possible. So that was always awesome. You'd get flicked with really hot rubber, and you couldn't
gotta love
breathe,
that.
and it's the finer things in life.
Did you know
The
that
finer
they
things.
actually they made tires,
That's what
and
you're
maybe it
into.
was for only sports bikes, but I saw this this tire company because I'm looking at doing an entire episode here, and they made these tires that if you burned them out to a certain, like you had to get them to a certain temperature, but they could turn in blue smoke, purple smoke, orange smoke, and you can have your burnout have different smoke color.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, you know what? I don't. Okay, I don't use rubbers.
Oh my
Oh
god.
my.
You know,
Seriously, we
I'm
need to
talking
cut
about
his mic.
galoshes.
Graham, just like the voices in your head, when he's in your head, you don't need to necessarily repeat everything
Thank
they
you.
say.
Okay. Perfect. I was talking about galoshes. I don't know where your guys' heads are at.
Or Crocs. you know.
Yeah.
No, so I think I never saw it, but I'm pretty sure I've seen videos of that, and it may well have been summer nights or something like that, where they pull like color smoke came out, sort of at the last part of the burnout.
So is this like once a year, or is this like?
Yeah, so summer nights is once a year, and it's summer for us, which is the opposite for you guys, right? So in January, or Christmas, you guys sit around the fire, we sit around the air conditioner. But yeah, it would be summer nats, and then we would have Easter nats, obviously for Easter. And that was sort of our we don't only have to wait once a year, we can get something else, and that's why I think when they took it away, it was such a.
So was it the drinking, or was it the like road racing? What was the main?
I would
issue?
say it was a combination of everything.
Both, yeah.
Obviously drinking and Australians sort of go hand in hand. But I think it was a lot of because it was at Sandown, right? And Sandown was in a neighborhood, if you will. I mean, obviously the track's pretty distance from houses and stuff, but if you take a really loud vehicle out on the streets in the middle of the night, you're going to go through a neighborhood, and I think it was a lot of that, right? People, the show would finish for the night,
right?
Everybody
And
jump in
people
their
leave in.
cars, and then everybody go hooning around the streets and causing a bunch of trouble. So I think it was a lot of that, but I think just in general, some of the general public doesn't like that many young hooligans getting together in one place. So I think that might have had something to do with it. Obviously, the cops having to deal with some of the rowdy people. For those 4 days might have been a little tolling on them. So I think it was just a huge combination of things, and it just took the neighborhood and the council and the cops all sort of going, yeah, no, none of us like this. Let's stop
Yeah,
this.
let's not do it.
But yeah, like I said, it created riots because these are the guys. This was their outlet, right? They build these cars, and twice a year it'd either go to summer nats or to Easter nats, and they spent their lives, if you will, building around these sorts of shows, and not necessarily summer nats and Easter nats, but other shows are around town and around the country throughout the year. So to have something like that taken away that they always look forward to, I think was what really triggered that response.
Well, let me know if they started back up again.
Well,
that way I can buy a house in that neighborhood, because I'd love to see
that's
the
where you want to live. Yeah,
I reckon I could get a bargain.
Yeah, well, and being a racetrack, there's stuff going on all year, so you can catch all sorts of events. It was really, really, I really enjoyed Easter nats every year, even though it was a little rowdy at times.
Definitely. Speaking of racing in Australia, I gotta ask you: have you ever been to the Melbourne Grand Prix?
I've never been to the Grand Prix, but the radio station I worked for back in the day, you could look out the studio window and see the track.
Oh, really?
And you could. The funny thing was, we had a fully soundproof studio, and the days that the races were happening, you could hear the cars on the microphones. There's
cool.
nothing we could do about it.
That's fantastic.
But it was pretty incredible. So no, I never went to a race. Obviously, watched them on TV almost every year. Schumacher days is sort of when I was watching it. But we could see it and hear it clearly from the station. So I'd have every excuse to go up on the roof and check the antennas, and then just sort of sit up there for a couple of hours with a beer in my hand and watch the races. So I'd never been, but got to see it from a distance a number of years.
Cool. Yeah, that's on my bucket list. I definitely want to go.
Oh, you got to
to the Melbourne Grand Prix. It seems like a great time. Speaking of other road races that go on down there, I'm not sure if you're familiar or not yet, but another one on my bucket list is the Targa Tasmania. Do you know
Yeah.
anybody that races in the Targa?
So
or-
I don't know anyone that races in that. I don't actually know. I don't have many mates down in Tassie, but I'd obviously I've heard of it. I've seen videos of it, but no, I've never been. And
Okay.
I'd say when you go to check that one off your bucket list, pack me in your suitcase because I'll come check that one out too.
All right, Josh, you
Enlighten
heard
us.
it. We have an excuse to go to Australia. We
Done.
need 3 tickets.
all
Done.
expenses paid.
all
sort of
expenses
thing,
paid
yeah.
to Melbourne.
And we'll take video cameras
Yeah.
and we'll get some great footage and do some interviews and all that stuff.
It's all about the content.
If
Yeah,
you want to
absolutely.
see us go to Australia, let our bosses know in the comments in the most crude Australian
Yes.
way possible.
Yes.
Oh man, that could
Say
that could get you banned from YouTube. I reckon some of those
No,
words.
it's not us doing it. It's
No,
the
but
fans.
them, that's what I'm saying. I don't
It's-
want them to get
it's-
banned.
No, exactly.
It's
I
just
think.
the Australian way, though.
It is.
You can't offend Australians,
Oh, you can't. It's
Unless-
very, very difficult to offend an
right?
Australian.
Well, you have to do you.
You have to
it-
do a
you
bad.
have to do harm to
you
your
have to
friends or
insult their
family.
car. Insult their car. That'll
really?
That'll pretty much take care of it.
God, I love this country.
This country or that
Both
country?
countries.
Yeah, they're
but
great.
Yeah,
Both.
I want to live in a place where they have big hooligan car meets and utes, and if the only way you offend
We have
somebody
it here.
is
It's called
by-
NASCAR.
Sure, which Daytona is next weekend.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, do you know anybody?
Hey, hold
in-
on. Before we go into this, this is actually something that I don't know, and I would like you to
Oh.
explain it to me. What is this Targo Tasmania?
The Targa Tasmania.
Yes.
So there are well, how do I put this?
Is this like the
This
Baja?
is something that we don't much get in the States, but it is a race, an all-out race on public roads, the public roads of Tasmania.
Got it.
So they close down the roads and they run a bunch of, Porsches and Japanese cars to the max. And
Is it just road version of cars?
it's kind of
or
like
can you
it's kind
do
of like the it's almost like a legal gumball.
gumball. Yeah.
Or,
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, they close down the roads, and these guys, like racing of old, well-to-do.
And it's open for them too, right? Like you can take any vehicle into it.
I haven't done too much research into it, but I think you or I could work our way to behind the, into a driver's seat of one
Yeah,
of those
I mean,
cars.
I don't-
It's kind of like I like to compare it to the La Carrera Panamericana.
Okay.
Which I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah, yeah.
But that one's in Mexico.
Right.
I think this one's just similar, but down in Tassie. So, yeah, which would be super
like
cool
it.
to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know we were just talking about NASCAR a little bit.
Yes.
Another racing series we could mention in Australia is V8 Australian Supercar.
V8 supercars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
I'm not super familiar with it. I actually have a friend who works on the marketing side of things down there.
Down the, in V8 supercars?
Yeah. He lives in Brisbane, and he used to work for V8 Supercar. I'm not entirely sure what he did. But it seems interesting. Is it a big to-do down there? Like, is it popular?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
'Cause it seems popular.
I would compare it to Daytona for you guys. It's like if you're a gearhead, it's the day everybody stops and either goes over to a mate's house and watches it, or
Oh, okay.
or you go to it or something like that. So for and I'd say the Grand Prix is pretty similar as well. But V8 Supercars is a whole nother story, right? Because you're talking about cars that you can
Production cars that you can go out
yeah,
and
cars
get.
that you can drive on the road. Well, I mean, not these builds.
Yes.
But yeah, cars that you see driving on the road every day, and they've been hotted up and modded up to be the best of the best. So and it was always very Holden and Ford in the forefront of it,
yeah.
right? So I think that was a lot of the driving force behind people being so excited about it. But to see the
Did
see
Holden
this.
start out as an Australian company and then they started building cars in Australia? Or was it like a subsidiary and then they just wanted to sell cars there and then
So
it became...
I might get this wrong, and then we'll get some angry comments about it. But as far as I understand, GM wanted to come into Australia and start doing vehicles down there. But at the time, it was way too expensive to build them here and
Yes.
ship them.
Yep.
So they came in under another brand, Holden, and then that's sort of it's always been a GM company. But I think it almost went independent there at one point. I'm not sure of the full story, and I'll bet you someone can write it up in a comment. and explain it better than I can. But I've always known Holden to have GM behind it.
Yeah, I know that Holden. I know that GM dropped it as like one of their main subsidiaries, but I know that they still had like a contracts with them, so they
Right.
still were like fulfilling until you said like 2016 or 2017. I know they stopped making cars there, but they were still fulfilling some like parts and other things like that. But Holden, I think, was maybe some other capital fund came in or something like that, but it was off of the GM branding.
Well, and some of the later vehicles there in Australia were on GM platforms.
Yeah, that too.
So they were always connected in some way. I don't know, the initial launch into Australia, but as far as I understood it, it was always GM, and it was just branded as Holden because they wanted to have, a separate brand, a separate division down there.
I just know that it's huge, and I know that the few Australian friends that I've had, one of the big things is the culture of Holden versus Ford was a big thing. It was it's here, it's Chevy versus Ford, so I mean it's just one of those things that I think those always help car cultures is when you can have some competition and one side is really strong for their team and the other side is just the same. So I always find that interesting when you go over into talk about other car cultures. Well, you can say that 3 times fast. But like it was just very interesting because the times that I've talked to people about car culture there, it was, yes, tuners are huge. And now it's even especially tuners are huge because that's all that you guys are getting is like these imports coming in. So I just know that there was like this idea that everyone works on their car. It was a big thing for me, for Australian car culture.
Yeah.
It's like a big thing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And the funny thing that's happening in Australia right now is vehicles that are some of those older generations are holding their value and becoming more valuable because people don't want to do the tuner thing. They want to stick with a V8. They want to work on an engine that's naturally aspirated or some of the older style V8 supercharged or V6 supercharged. And so you're getting all these little sort of 4-cylinder turboed up things, and it's not, at least for some of my mates in Australia, it's not their brand of cheese, if you will. And they're trying to buy up all the old V8s and stuff and all the old Commodores and stuff because that's what they want to work on.
Right. Would you go more Japanese or would you go more like European, German?
Nowadays?
Yeah.
Well, I drive a Volkswagen Golf R,
So
that's going to be very German.
And what's your other car?
Okay. So this is the other thing it's the thing about the culture thing, right? So when I moved here, I jumped into the truck culture. And I was really into Fords, F-150s, F-250s, really got into diesels.
Such a Holden guy, let me tell you.
I know. I don't know what happened to me. But I
went to the dark side for a while.
I don't know. I wasn't going the GM route just because it was tied to Holden.
Right.
But I have a Dodge Dually 3500 now with the big boy Cummins and the 4-5 ratio, so I can pull about 30,000 pounds, and I feel very manly in it.
Yeah, I mean that's.
And then I step out of that and I step into my Volkswagen Golf, which I could drive over with my Dodge.
Right.
So it's interesting transitioning. And the funny thing is, my wife and I were talking about the other day. We somehow ended up with 2 identical gray vehicles. I don't know if you've noticed that. But the Dodge and the Golf park right next to each other are always the same color. And it was not the intention at all. But yeah, nowadays I always like Volkswagen. I always love the Golf line, the GTIs, and all that sort of stuff.
Excellent cars.
Had one here for a year and a bit, and then had a kid, and that was a 2-door GTI.
Oh, nice.
So car seat in the GTI was not cool. Although the kid loved it. I mean, I'd take off in that thing and she'd be like, "Wah!" But now that she's older, we were trading up one of the cars, and I was like, you know what, I want the Golf back.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the Golf R, and I'm super happy with it. It's unbelievably powerful. I mean, it's a tiny little engine with a fat boy turbo on it, so it's a bit laggy. But
still enough to get you in trouble.
Oh yeah, absolutely enough to get you in trouble, and I can smoke my friends with their WRXs, so I'm pretty happy about that.
And in your defense, I know you do have a big fifth wheel that you tow with your.
I do. Yeah. So I've got a 17,000 pound fifth wheel that the Dodge tows around. Actually, I was towing that stupid thing with a F-250. 6.0, if you know that fantastic diesel engine that Ford came up with there in 2006. So we pulled it around with that for a while, which is a little over the rating limit of that truck. But then again, Australians will pull a camper like that with a sedan.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. That is one thing I did notice about last time I was down there. You'd see these huge caravans
Yep.
being towed by a car,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yep.
I'm like,
Yeah, we used to
Like-
go camping every year when I was growing up, and we had some mates that had this old caravan. It must have been in pounds, probably like 12,000 pounds bumper pull.
that's a camper for you, America.
That's a camper caravan, and they pull that thing around with their Commodore station wagon.
Unbelievable. And if I think I remember correct, we were talking a little bit earlier before the show. You actually still own some cars back in Australia,
I
don't
do.
you?
So they're either with family or they're in storage. The ones in storage I won't go into, but yeah, I've got a couple of vehicles back there. I have an R32 Skyline actually,
Josh,
which is in
we need to go.
which
to
is in
Australia.
pieces. So if you were to come, it will be a let's rebuild it party. But that one's it's actually in good. The engine's really in good condition. It's all the body. So it was basically in an accident. It got what you guys would call a salvage title. And I was like, there's no way. Like, this is mostly body damage and cosmetic, and all the innards are really good. So there's no way I'm letting this one go to the junkyard. So I bought that up and stuck that in storage. And
Excellent.
it's sitting on the farm right now. And I got a couple other vehicles down there, but they're either basic vehicles that the family drives around in, or they're works of art, if you will, that are sitting in storage, waiting for me to come back and finish them one day. It's funny because I was like, I want to put one of these in a container and ship it over here and
Yeah.
work on it over here. Do you have any idea how expensive that is?
I've never looked into it.
I said to myself, you know what would make sense? I'll bring the Skyline over, right? Because it's so sought after that it's the
Yeah.
original build and everything. Nope. It's not old enough, so I can't fall under the 25-year rule.
25-year, yeah. Gotcha.
And it's just the cost of doing it and getting it over here and not being forced to change it for
Ooh.
left-hand drive is such an amount of paperwork, and it's one of those you got to know people to sort of get
Right.
it done. So, but yeah, there's some cars sitting back there, and if you guys ever make it down, we'll do a tour one day. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
Well,
I like
definitely.
that. I like that.
Josh, how much time do we have left? We have 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. Are there any odd Australian car slang terms
Oh, yeah, that
that
is
you
a
know
question.
off the top
car
of your
slang.
head? That,
Like the one that pops into my head is hoon.
Hoon, okay.
So they actually have laws written around this called the hoon law. And so if you get pulled over for speeding and you're over a certain speed, it falls under the hoon law and you lose your vehicle.
oh, okay.
Wait, you lose your vehicle?
Oh yeah.
Not your license.
No, you lose your license too. But yeah, they take it. They essentially impound
Sounds
your
like
vehicle
marriage.
for a period of time. I don't know what period that is, but yeah, like if I was doing 25, 30 Ks over the speed limit, which would be like 20 miles, 21 miles for you guys, that will be the hoon law, and that'll be saved by car for a while.
I just accidentally just blah blah blah, and but my thought is this: I'm thinking Australia is like the Wild West, and now I hear all these law things that you have.
In some
and now
regards,
I'm like,
it is. And
I'm like,
others,
Right,
not so
but
much.
if you take into consideration the stupid things we do to cars,
Yeah.
then they have to create these laws around our stupidity.
Oh, trust me, I've looked up cars from Australia and like the tuner stuff.
See, like I'd say I drive cars at 160 kilometers an hour like a
Yeah,
champion.
right.
But because the dude next to me couldn't do it, I'm not allowed to do it anymore. See? So
yeah.
it's, one person has to ruin it for the rest of us.
I'm sad about that.
No, but that's where a lot of this came from, right? Because we're such gearheads down there that we would make these cars that do 1,000 horsepower at the wheels and
Right.
and we take them out on the street. So
Mike, I think it is only right and natural.
I mean, yes, I agree. Yes, do be safe and drive under the correct laws. But I mean, I drive 100 on the highway all the time here.
There's a crazy
Easily.
amount of speed cameras down there too.
Yep.
From what I reckon.
They're everywhere, and you won't even know it's there, right? It'll be like a 71 Datsun sitting on the side of the road, and there'll be a little camera built into the bumper, and sometimes you won't even know you got your photo taken until the ticket shows up. So yeah, it's either that or there's a cop sitting around every corner, and you don't speed down there. And they say that what they're saying is the speed limit is the speed limit. So if you're doing 2 kilometers over, you can get a ticket.
Correct.
So they say if you don't want to get a ticket, do under the speed limit.
Yep, definitely. Can confirm. All right. Well, I think Josh is indicating that we are out of time.
So mean.
Real quick on that note, I just want to say if you want to drive fast, save it for the Targa.
Yeah.
Or the
Or
other
for
event.
Summonats.
Yep. Exactly. Otherwise, drive the speed limit and take in all of Australia's beautiful sights. The Great Ocean Road, which we did not get to, is one of the best places to drive in the world. But we'll have to save that for another time. I think that about wraps it up, guys.
Yep.
Josh, I just want to say thank you for keeping our fluids topped off this whole entire time and for not falling asleep this time.
We appreciate it when you stay awake.
Yeah, I know.
I'm getting the finger.
He's now giving us the one finger salute.
Meaning, hurry up. This
Exactly.
finger salute.
Exactly.
Sorry.
He's ready to get out of here. Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, thanks for giving us cars to test. We look forward to it. It's one of the most enjoyable parts of our job. And ourcommunitynow.com, which gives us our platform to voice our opinions and talk more about cars. If you want to hear more, feel free to tailgate us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Red Circle, and like I said, Our Community Now. And don't forget the annual Family Fest in Denver. All you have to do is go to eventbrite.com, search Family Fest to get your tickets. Act now, the day of the event. Tickets are $15, but if you do it now, they're only $10. Or if you use the promo code, which Josh is now going to remind me of, OCN half, you can get those tickets for $5. So yeah, that should be pretty cool. There's going to be, you can take selfies with Clifford, free kids activities, vendors, prizes, stage presentations, and more. Kids are free.
Ooh.
So
Sounds like a good time.
If you didn't get all that information, just start this thing over with an adult paid ticket. If you didn't get all that information, just start this thing over.
We
and
probably could just
hear me
jam that
read.
into our little article thing that we put a shout
Yeah,
on.
we can always put it in the article too.
Yeah.
And Graham, did you have
I
a
do
message
have
for us?
I do want to make sure we do have a lot of podcast listeners, so I want the podcast listeners to get a little shout out here. Podcast listeners, if you haven't done so, please go to YouTube and check us out, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. And then once you subscribe to the channel, make sure you smash that little bell thing. Because that gives us some notifications. That gives you notifications on when a new video comes out. And you can actually look at all of our other videos, or you can just click our videos to go ahead and get. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. It really helps us, and we really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, thank you, Mike, for joining us.
Absolutely.
And thank all of you for listening to another gasoline episode of OCN Drives.
Peace.